Hey guys, so today is 26. So you guys know I'm doing 31 days. So yes, you're going to see a video until the very end of the month. So today's a word of the day for a journal mood challenge is ego. It's a good one. It's a very good one. You guys know the theme is release, and we know ego can be, our own ego can get in our way and prevent us from releasing things that we need to let go of. So hopefully you guys are able to write and use that word for your journal prompt today. So yeah, so let's talk about one of my favorite genres. You guys been following me, you know I'm a classic girl. I get so much entertainment and laughter when it comes to classic, and I appreciate it now than I was when I was younger, because there's just so much element of it now that I'm like, whoa, the clever writing, the way things were, and sometimes it surprised me. Now, I'm a Dickens girl. I didn't read one Dickens this year. Who am I? Nevertheless, I got some good stuff, and I did not read that many. 9. I typically read, I think, around maybe 15, 15 to 18 that typically. So 9 wasn't that many, and because I failed at October, Victober, yeah, Victober. Yes, I failed at it. I think I've only read one classic that entire month. So yeah, but I'm thinking I'm gonna do better next year. I did get one Harlem Renaissance. Woo. So I'm happy about that. Because I've been slacking on completing my Harlem Renaissance list, which I want to pick up because there's still a few books that I need to finish on that list. But let's get into it. So we start off with an actual classic that was a recommendation, and that is The Island of Dr. Moro. Not my kind of book because it was a horror, but it was very entertaining, and it really, before it's time when you think about people manipulating science on human and the outcome of it, and then it really gets into the animalistic behavior of human, whether they're being manipulated or not, that kind of deal. So I really enjoyed this. This one was from H.G. Wells. It was my first book from this author, and I definitely want to read more. I like that it was short, because if I'm going to be in this world, I don't want to be in there that long. It was also fun because I did a book to movie adaptation, and this is one of the book to movie adaptation that actually worked, because when you think of what they were able to adjust from the book to the movie, made sense, and it worked for the movie. So this was a good one. I think it's Val Kilmer was in there too. So the cast was pretty good. They had a really good cast. All right, so the next one is one of my favorite, Anna Karina. I avoided this book for years, and this was another book that a subscriber suggested out of the jar, and I'm glad I read it. And so this is Leo Tolstoy. He's not my first book from this author. I believe this is my third. I believe this is my third from the author. I can't remember all the others of that, but I know for sure I've read other bigger books from him. And this is my biggest book I read, because it was one of those like 800 something pages book. I was entertained, thoroughly entertained. This is a classic when you think of the fact that I did not like the main character. Anna Karina was that character that I couldn't stand, and her pettiness at the end cost her, and I was enjoying that. I was enjoying that. I was screaming, I was hollering reading that book. I felt like, yes, like if you're gonna be a jerk in a book and essentially your own demise. So I really enjoyed this book. I am shocked because I've been avoiding this book thinking that it was going to be super boring and I wasn't going to enjoy it, but it really is the tale of, the grass is not always green on the other side, and how two families, two lives were changed because of a decision that involved infidelity, and how it affects a child in that sense. And this is a classic that really toys on the fact that a lot of women back then had to depend on men. You couldn't work, you can do anything. So is what you do in your house and how you choose to find ways to make a relationship work is key in this book. And it became more than, you know, than you would think. And it also gives you the whole background on where you live, you know, versus the countryside of people trying to make it and surviving, versus like living on the other side where it's considered you somewhat have some form of wealth, that kind of deal. I enjoyed this. I was entertained. Love it. Then we have the only Harlem Renaissance. She barely made it to the end, and that was Mules and Men by Zora Neale Hurston. And this is another author that I've read. This might be book number 3 from the author. And I was very entertained by this. You know, this is one of those down south on the stoop, listen to folks having these folklore and folk tales about things and telling these stories, and it just gave me this nostalgic feel for when I was younger and listen to my uncle telling stories that, you know, they are Nancy stories and these things. But there's a theme on the stories and how what was being told in the story. I like this. I thought this was interesting, and how it talks about the good and the bad. Who was the good person, who was the bad person kind of deal. She did good on this. I was really, really impressed with this. Then we have another classic that from an author I've never heard of and was new to me, which is Cousin Bet, and this is by Honoré de Balzac. I don't know nothing about this French author, but let me tell you, Cousin Bet was that. He was that bitch. Every time I think about it, I just have to just say it. She is. And it's certain classic that has these women who are seeking like revenge for being wronged. I love those kind of classic, and I love those characters. I think that's why I like some of the women in Charles Dickens' book, because you know you can't, everybody cannot be this housewife or just like made to please a man and not have any personality. So when a female character in classics have that personality that you just feel like is sharp edge, brutal at times, I am here for it. And in this case, I felt bad for her because of how her family treated her, and this, you know, how her heart was broken, and I was rooting for her. Now, I did watch the movie. It was trash. Don't recommend the movie. And also the book, the edition of the book I got was horrible too, so don't even do that to yourself. But most, what I would say is, it did have moments of it where there was a religious tale at the end, trying to like, you know, restore your faith in doing the right thing, and that threw me off a bit, and I was like, what? But then I realized it's a time, I think he was trying to smooth over the audience, because I'm sure based on when that book was written, it was in, let's see, what year was it published? In 1846. It might have been like, you know. And then, so the next book now that I read was a classic that I've watched the movie so many times growing up. I loved the movie and never read the book, and that is Little Women. And this is, I read this book because of, it was, there was a book called Hello Beautiful that I read, which it was a homage to Little Women. So I knew I had to read the original first, then read that and kind of do a little comparison, which I did a video for. You can check it out. Now, what I would say with Little Women, it still gave me that feel, and I realized that when I was reading it, it was written in 2 volumes. So volume 1 came out in 1868 and the other one was 1869. So when I bought that beautiful edition, I didn't realize it was just volume 1. So I downloaded the Kindle version to get part 2. So I was able to finish it, and I love it. I'm still a Joe fan. That is still my favorite character. But I love that I understood a little bit more than what the movie provided. So of course, the books is always better. The book's always going to give you more. And this is a classic that I absolutely love. So I'm looking forward to picking up volume 2 and just so I can have to my collection, because that was a pretty edition that I got. I just really wish it was like the entire 2 volume in that. But this is another classic that is absolutely fantastic, and I'm glad I was able. Then the next one was one of the most, like, I think, classic that's just deep, and that is Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. Now I believe this is my third by the author. East of Eden and I think The Pearl were the only two that I've read, so this is the third one, and I'm definitely a fan of him. And this book really digs into the fact that sometimes things that you love, things that you care about, things that you value can also be your demise. That could also get into your way of getting to that where you want to go. So this is like another book that just gives me the whole journal mood theme that we have going on. And it was a sad and brutal how it's told, but sometimes that is the case. It's getting rid of something might be hard, and it might be take a lot out of you, but it has to be done. That's how I was just like soaking into this book. It is a short book, but it's so good. Now this is a classic that was written back in 1937, so keep in mind that it going to have languages that can be a little bit tough, is in the N word. And so that was the only part of the book where I'm like, I just did not care for that. But again, it is a classic, and oftentimes those words were used in books during, I think, the 30s and the 40s. I think after that it kind of even the 20s, it kind of got less, where they realized just don't use that word. So that was the one thing where I noticed in this book compared to these other books. I've never heard that kind of language, but it's in there, so it's a warning for those of you who do read it. Then we have The Street. And The Street by Ann Petrie. This is from 1946. Now this is after the Harlem Renaissance, so she did not make the list for Harlem Renaissance because this was after. What I would say is this is a story that really have you on this path where you're just like, this life of a single mother and the circumstance that she's in, and then that one decision that she made that was life-changing, and how it can really be realistic for some people living in an area where poverty-stricken, where housing is an issue, and where they don't have means, and what can happen if people prey on them. I was like so into this. I was not expecting that ending. I was not expecting the direction it was going. In my mind, it was going to, it was going downhill. There's things that was going to happen that I just knew in my mind, oh my God, that's going to happen. And I was just like waiting for that. But it gave me something else that was just bad. I'll say just heart-wrenching at the same time. But it was just like, oh, this author took a chance, and she might have crushed a couple of readers, but that's okay, because that's when you know she was being herself. Now this book was controversial when it came out, and there was a lot of discussion of how to even put it in a category, what genre, what how would they even sell a book like this because of what the storyline. And again, it was before its time. This is 1946. Of course, there was not a lot of black books out in the first place, so for her to do this, and the writing, let me tell you, believe the hype. This is a classic that I've seen so many times, and I've seen so many people talk about, and I'm always like, believe it. It is worth the read. Believe it. Then we have Palace of the Peacock, and this is Wilson Harris. This is 1960 that this book was. This is the only Caribbean book on my list, and I'm glad I found it during Caribbean. Caribbean always make me research and find older books. I'm always searching for older books that are done by Caribbean author. This is from a Guyanese author, and I never heard of him, which is shame on me because he is very respected in the literary world, and I was just like, who? But I was so glad I read it. It is a difficult book because it's a genre I don't really read a lot of. It's really magical realism, fantasy sort of kind of deal, and it really goes through Guyana in a way that it's just like in a spiritual but discovery way of you felt like you were there in the rainforest. You felt the journey that these guys were going on, and this is a story that really dealt with the haunting wants and search to find something that you think you need. And in this case, you have this man searching for a woman that is like he cannot get her out of his system, and this journey that he dragged these people with. And then you also learn about the bits and pieces of the people along the way. Now, because this is a genre I typically don't read, it was a challenge for me to really get into the mindset of what the story was about. And but I don't regret it. I think it's just, it was one of those where you do need to read stories like this just to widen your thought process on certain theme in books. And this one was interesting, very haunting, very much giving me Guyana, very much giving me Caribbean. So I was here for it again. But it's also historical fiction in this. But this one, again, this was 1960, and this is, I think, the youngest. My oldest reviewed classic, oldest. Matter of fact, I think the oldest books I've had read is from Jane Austen's, because her books are before the Victorian time, and I'm a fan. I've read all her books, including her short story, and I have not read any of her unpublished ones that were later published, which I think I'm interested in those as well. But anyway, this is Fanny Hill, and this was a book that was published back in 1748, and I'm like, wow, this is erotica. This is an erotic novel. To think that in 1748 they were writing books like this is amazing to me, because I didn't have a clue. I would think this would have been so forbidden, and it was. It was a book. It is considered one of the most banned books in history, and rightfully so, because for the time period that this was written in, when you find out how old the character is, it was not going to be a taboo thing. What made it banned back then was the fact of the sexual content, versus now it will be more banned because of the age of the character versus the sexual act. Now, the age was a bit disturbing when I think of it now, but when I think of when this book was published, it's a little bit easier to understand that this was somewhat of a norm of somebody trying to survive. You are a young girl, your parents passed away, then you have no means to survive, so you are at the mercy of other people who can manipulate and use you in terms of getting what they want, and in return for you to survive. Now, it is told in letter form, so there's two parts, and basically she's older now, life has changed. You learn at the end what happened to her as far as life, and she's talking about the journey that she went on and the things that she had to do. And it is a bit disturbing as you realize how old she is and what she had to do and what people made her, participate in. But there are moments of this where it's like she realized that she can be a bit of a hypocrite, because there are moments where she liked it. So there's a thin line between pleasure in this and what she actually finds herself liking. Even from the first encounter with her sexual experience, it was just not something that she's just welcome. It happened, but she found some pleasure that she didn't understand. So there's bits of this in this where it's a learning kind of lesson of someone's sexuality, but it's also a sad tale of not having your own say in certain things that can be sexual. So it's a really tough book to read, but I do think that if you're into erotic, if you're into newer books that have that content, I think this book you will learn a lot, because of the fact that when you think of books that are really key to sex and pain, or sex and mental health, you find that this book talks about bits and pieces of that, the bondage situation, the flogging situation, stuff like that you find in newer, especially the book, one of the series that I read, The Salacious Club. You see that in this, where they talk about what people who are going through mental distress and how sex becomes a big deal for them, and how they express themselves in trying to heal and or trying to release what is going on with them. So this book really covers stuff like that. Now, what makes this book separate themselves from the newer book? The writing, absolutely poetic. This is a writing that just flows. Like the author was talking about things that really could have been such a vulgar way of saying it, but it's just done in a way where the writing was absolutely beautiful. And that's the one thing I could say about this author. This author definitely was a writer that really knew. It's a man that really did capture. Now, the things that was funny to me is how they express body parts. You know, the machine, or if they're going to have sex and we're going to war. This like stuff like that I find very funny, because I guess back then you probably couldn't say what you really wanted to say in books, because that would have probably got the book thrown out and not published. But this is where the differences come. But the act itself, you're fully aware of that. You're fully aware of what they're doing and things that they're talking about in this book. Absolutely love it. I wish I had the original cover, because the book that I got, the cover wasn't that great to me. But I've seen the covers of the original ones, and those covers were fantastic. So if I ever get into one of those old bookshops, or if anybody knows and can direct me to the original cover, or even not even just the original, there are covers even after that are still good compared to the modern one I saw, where I'm like, no, I want some of the older covers for this book. And if you know, let me know, because I want it in my collection. And thanks for, the person who recommended this, because again, I would have never known about Fanny Hill. Who the hell is Fanny Hill again? Or or John Cleland. I don't even know who that person is either. Another new author to me. So anyway, I'm gonna end this here, because this is the only 9 books that I read that was classic. I'm hoping to make a difference in my classics next year. I gotta get back to my Dickens. Absolutely gotta get back to my Dickens. And then some newer authors that I am not familiar with, that I have on my bookshelf. And all those that people have recommended to me, let me know. I love juicy stuff like this. Give me the juicy classic. Give me the classic that I'm totally gonna enjoy and really talk about and get something out of it. And yeah. But anyway, all right guys, see you guys in the next one tomorrow. Bye.